It's been a real joy to be with USGS, and maybe that's the best way to kind of start is, most of you are well and probably really familiar with GS, but frankly, what we do is provide science. It's a science agency inside the Department of Interior. That's been our mission, and since the very beginnings of my career, when I got out of the service and ended up in the Floodplain Planning Unit at ODNR, 1978, USGS has been one of those great partners, and it was a real joy to go to work for them. So, our scientists and our technicians are all over, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but just remember, we're everywhere. If you're not already involved with your local USGS office, there's someplace you should get to know them. They can be helpful, and we're always looking for input on what your needs are. So I got a little quote the other day. One of my USGS colleagues reminded me that there was this book called The Big Thirst, The Secret Life and Turbulent Future of Water. And although most of the theme in this is water availability across the world and what a big challenge that's going to be with us, he had this nice quote in an op-ed piece not too long ago in March, I think. It's exactly the state of water. We've got crisis percolating all over, but lack of the data necessary to make smart policy decisions. And data is really somewhat what it's all about. I put the slide reel on here because as I was looking through images, I started laughing. When I started, and I'm one of those gnarly, civil engineers from the 70s, that's what I started calculating with. And it sounds silly. How many of you ever used a slide rule? Raise your hand. Okay, got a good bunch. Good. You still have one, raise your hand. Yeah, same bunch. Yep. Sitting in a drawer, maybe a couple of them. But since then, things have really changed. Things have changed in the way we collect data. Things have changed in the way we manage and turn data into other things, and the way we serve data out to the public and how accessible it is. So, nowadays, we get, I guess the best story is, used to be we'd go out every 4 to 6 weeks, look at our gauges, pull the records, go back, work them, have fun. Now if a gauge goes down, we get a call immediately from a kayaker or a fisherman. Why is my gauge not working? Because they're using it every day in order to figure out whether they want to go fishing. So good data creates useful information. Useful information creates informed knowledge, and that informed knowledge supports the effective actions that we all need to take in the public sector and the private sector in our private and public lives. So data drives things, but it's not just data. You have to turn it into information, and you have to somehow turn that information into knowledge. So USGS has about 8,100 stream gauges scattered throughout the country. And what I wanted to point out on the bottom of this is that half of those, almost, 47% of them, are funded by state and local government. That kind of gives us at the USGS the idea that that's important, that somehow it's being used and it's being used well, and it's important to the flood managers, it's important to the design engineers that are doing new bridges, and the water managers that are trying to figure out how to get water to our people. So we deliver data in a number of different ways. NWIS Web is probably where most of you are. The screens across the bottom are Water Watch, nice convenient ways to see all the gauges, and actually they have their own information on them, which kind of tells you where it's wet, where it's dry, and what might be going on. But that's not the only one. Water Services is stream data. There's a lot of folks, and a growing number we'll see in a minute, that are starting to go in, grab the data, use it in their own systems and modeling or delivery systems that they've built. You can get water alert information where your favorite gauge will tell you that I'm at 8 feet now, okay, or whatever. Water Now lets you know to ask a gauge where it's at right now, and the Water Watch, like I said, group of pages let you pretty much see what's going on in your state or in the United States. So I just pulled, for an illustration, Michigan the other day, Sunday, I think. Yeah, Sunday. Okay, and if you hover over any gauge, you get a number of pieces of information you can see right away. This particular one is kind of the highest historical floods and their magnitude at the gauge on the Grand River here in Grand Rapids. So if you ever want to do that, if you have a favorite gauge, if you don't have a favorite gauge, please go find one and adopt it. You know, that's pretty lonely sitting out there all by yourself, okay, bubbling along in some cases or using new fancy sensors. You know, so adopt a gauge and get it on your water alert form so it texts you every time it's doing something fun, okay? And you know, seriously, this is the Floodplain Management Association. You know, you guys are in the work of trying to understand what's going on, and so you probably are all. Let me ask you that. How many of you have water alert on your phones for the gauges near your area that you're responsible for? Okay, good. We want to get that number up. If you're managing water and managing floods, and there's a USGS gauge, you probably want to get yourself plugged into it. So the future of that, in the next year or so, that whole front end of WaterWatch and the way we serve that data is going to get a little more easier. So we're trying to get a much better map-based kind of dashboard that lets you select an area, zoom in on it, and start pulling up real data about the status of the gauge in real time, and also link to historic information. We might even have pictures of the gauge on it so you can look at the gauge you adopted. All the federal agencies, frankly, since the last few years when the White House came out with an open transparency requirement for federal funded research, which basically just says that all the data that was used to develop that research has to be delivered in some form that the public can use, find, and reuse, okay? USGS has always had, as part of its mission, to try to get our data and research and the data driving that research out to the public as fast as we can. That's the reason why we publish. That's the reason why we have systems like NWIS. So, you know, we're pretty much in line with that. But even for us, there's a little bit of angst in trying to figure out how to better do this. But in the long run, universities, anybody can be able to get in and get all the data used in any of the USGS and most of our federal partner publications, I believe. So what I wanted to show here is this is just a graph from 2001 till 15 that basically NWIS Web is the web pages and NWIS Water Services is that push system. And what we see here, interesting enough, since 11, look at the growth in how many folks are coming in, grabbing the data, taking it out, and utilizing it in some way, shape, or form in their own systems. And that's going to do nothing, as we can see, but grow. Because there's a lot of you out there that are designing things that work well for you. And trying to make that data available is very important to us. So we have a lot of data networks, and what I wanted to say here is we're not the only one. Okay, and that's, I think, another exciting things over my career is the fact that all the agencies were friends, now they're collaborators, and that's growing all the time. And one collaboration is, since we have all this real-time gauge data and the Weather Service has all the precip data and predictive models, when they built the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction System, it seemed like that ought to be a great marriage between what is going on and what might be coming, and a good service to those of you in the flood management business or in any of the water businesses. So by taking the Weather Service rainfall forecasts and marrying it up with the USGS stream gauges, running them through their predictive modeling, they end up with a place where they can serve out basically a picture of both what is happening now and what they're predicting might be happening. Kind of an aside story. When I was a very young intern at ODNR in '79, one of the frustrations with the Weather Service to say the flood stage is going to reach 13 feet. Okay. What does that mean? I can remember drawing with a Leroy set, back before computers were really going, a set of stage gauges and marrying them up where I could, or where we could, it wasn't just me doing this, that where we had flood frequency information from flood insurance studies or the USGS, we could kind of put what the 10-year was, the 50 or the 100, because it gave you some information, right? It gave you an idea what might happen if it actually got to that stage. Well, that's what AHAPS and this partnership actually do, and it's led to this flood inundation mapping program, FEMI, okay, which is growing all the time, and basically is that translation of the hydrograph into an operational map set that you can basically take a slider and go up and down so you can match stage with inundation area. So we're in the process, us and other partners, of building map libraries in many places across the country. And what it'll let you do very simply is to, when you pick a spot and put the slider on that, it basically shows you flood extent. So it's a series of static maps, if you will, okay, most of them are static, that when you put the slider on, it shows you the inundation area. And you can, I think, see, if you're not already using that, who's using inundation maps? Anybody from community? Okay. The utility as a flood manager seems to me to be huge, okay, because you can do scenario modeling, can do all sorts of stuff. Right now, FEME is, this is a map of the existing map libraries across the country. They're in the USGS Flood Inundation Mapper Service. So a little more about that, because I think this is one of those things as it develops over the next few years that's pretty cool. And it lets you do those what ifs. It's tied to real data, both with us and the Weather Service. It lets you do mitigation and planning. And in the long run, it's going to help out on some ecological studies too. So you could take a look at all the way down through, what's the 7-year inundation area likelihood, so you can look at ecological and floodplain processes. But also, if you knew you had a spill and you had an inundation map, you could kind of pin down where the likely edges of that contamination were. We're also looking at Marie Pepler, who's somewhere out here. Marie, what'd you do, skip my presentation? Anyway, Marie Pepler, who's an expert on this, is certainly someone you might want to talk to if you're interested. But there's things like we're trying to make that situation even better by trying to make the process of coming up with reasonable map libraries faster and getting some more information from the soils and wetlands and things that we might be able to tag back to likelihood of flooding. There's also, I'll believe this when I see it, but there's also, and it is true, there's certain kinds of aperture-based radar that you can get pretty darn good elevation data out of. So maybe in the future, we'll be able to figure out as a flood happens exactly what extent it has and use that information to back into a series of reasonable inundation areas. Lots of stuff. Maybe we'll all be flying drones out of our office here before too long. In Michigan, there's a couple of FEME efforts. The Lansing was just completed, and in fact, if you're interested, Cindy Rachel from the Michigan Ohio Water Science Center has a session on B7. We have a couple of other communities that are in discussion or in progress. Talked a little bit about partnerships and collaboration and the difference maybe over the years, at least that I've seen, and there's a lot of good collaboration going on now. The Integrated Water Resource Science and Services, IRIS, which is kind of a group of federal agencies, the Corps, USGS, NOAA, National Weather Service, and FEMA. They're doing a lot of work about how to talk to each other enough so we know what we're doing in terms of information delivery and simplifying the access to the data so that you, the ultimate users, can get to it faster and use it easier. In the long run, we'd really like to have all sorts of neat stuff that you could pull up at need when you need it, in the middle of a flood or in planning for floods. That's good data and good information so that you can build that knowledge that comes off of using that kind of information. There's also an ASWI subcommittee on hydrology, which is a more expanded group of not just federal partners, but lots of other folks. And one of the things, the last bullet on there is we're all trying to, as agencies, trying to create a more cohesive message about the value, uses, economic benefit, and critical gaps in our stream flow information programs. And we need your support for that, because ultimately, Congress doesn't listen to the agencies. They listen to the people who are using it and think it's important. So one of the things I want to talk about real quick is just the fact that there's this kind of change going on in how we handle long-term historic flood data. This is the record, if you will, from '84 to '12. here at Grand Rapids. As we move into the future, we want to be able to better predict the changes that are going on and better predict maybe the reasonable levels to protect and understand. And we can do that actually, interesting enough, by doing a little more backwards looking at times. So the forward-looking side of this, as I said, is we got drones, we have all sorts of stuff, all the technology we have now that you can, put a camera on the top of this building pointed at the Grand River and collect an incredible amount of information about flow, velocities, and what really happens during a flood. All that's going to be growing and changing all the time. But if we look, this is Spencer, Iowa River. And, what we've always done, if you use 17B or if you use a lot of the other methodologies, we've always looked at that record that we have that's continuous. Okay, so in this particular example, there's 38 years of continuous data. Okay, but we know from history that there were some big floods earlier on this particular river. So we start including that data, which is what the new 17C methodology will do. You can basically, I won't pretend to be academically qualified anymore to tell you how this works, but you can basically, they're real comfortable, they can do a lot better with using the data that we have from the past. So if you look at that, just using the 38 years of record, you get a 1% flood of about 7,900. If you include the historic record in the new methodology, the 100-year flood's more like 17,000. I'm not saying they're all going to go up, okay? I'm just saying that we have a little better idea what they are. So if you're interested in that, Julie Kank from Office of Surface Water has a training workshop at 3 o'clock today, which I think is a workshop you had to sign up for, but I don't know if there's any extra spaces in it if you're interested. So let's go back to that. What can you do, if you haven't already done it, to help build the data sets and build the information that will let us best utilize all of that information? Well, it used to be, if you had a record, you had a gauge, and you worked the record, and you tried to keep it continuous, and that's what we worked with because it was the best that we could. When in fact, we can go back. We can document existing floods. With aerial and satellite data, we can look almost real time at the flood extents as they happen. We can deploy systems of rapid gauges to capture stage information when we know a flood's coming or we know a storm surge is coming on a coast. But we need to document that, not just USGS, but everyone needs to document that because that data is critical in really understanding both what's going on and, as we know, as climate change happens, things are always changing. So that's an opportunity, I think. We can collect more and better flood information from everywhere, from every building in a town that's been flooded that somebody remembers it got this high. If we can document that, we can learn more and be better at this. Paleo records, we can do work with the old stuff in geology to try to figure out what the floods used to look like. And USGS, who has a database of high water marks, is going to open up that in the next year to furnished record, which means if we can get high water mark data from someone else, we can go ahead and put that in there so it's on the system where you can get at it. So what are some of the challenges? I think coordinating data collection information products is always a challenge, and especially a challenge now. I don't know about you guys, but it's almost like there's too much information, okay? And we got really smart people that are trying to find ways to get that information to you. If we could take advantage of things like crowdsourcing, where during floods we can get high water marks almost immediately, or high inundation areas defined, how do we collect and utilize that information? Everybody likes to make map viewers. Everybody likes to personalize the stuff and get credit for it. Don't mind that. But I think underlying that, we need to make sure that we're coordinating and thinking through how we expend our resources the best to get the best information to you, who ultimately is the customer, if you will, that we need to get to. Okay. We need to create long-term support for all the gauging and data efforts. It's very difficult to explain why you still need to measure the flow on rivers, especially to legislators, okay? So we need, and it's not our voice that really sets that stage, it's your voice. And I think we have to do a better job of learning how to use all these data sets together and understand their uncertainties so they can be utilized effectively together. And let's continue to work together in organizations like yours, okay, and amongst all the agencies and folks that touch this stuff and share all the great ideas we all have. So good data creates useful information creates informed knowledge, and informed knowledge supports that effective actions that we're all trying to take to protect and better protect our world and our citizens. And with that, thanks.